Welcome to Technical Leadership Talks, the podcast that brings you advice, insights, and knowledge from industry leaders and experts on how to navigate managing in a technical field. Technical Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management, an online graduate program that trains industry professionals for leadership positions. I'm Katie, METM's digital marketer and your host for this episode. In today's episode, we are featuring Austin Gary, the Senior Project Manager at Structural. We discuss how leaders can strengthen workplace culture while navigating the differing management styles of multiple generations. So can you share a bit about your current role and your career background?
So currently I'm a senior project manager for a company called Structural Group. We do primarily industrial strengthening and reinforcing projects. My group is specifically out of the Houston office. Naturally, if you're familiar with the Houston area, we're right there in Deer Park. So pretty darn close to all the refineries and the plants in that area. You know, some background on my career. Originally out of college, I was with the YMCA of Greater Houston. I was a development director. I had a passion for people, a passion for development. And then on the side, I had a passion for building things. And I thought, man, I need to marry all these passions together. So I found my way into construction. Actually started out sweeping streets in downtown Houston with a bachelor's degree, and with some hard work and a thirst for learning, worked my way up and had a lot of great experiences to get me to where I'm at now.
Today, we're going to be talking about generational divides in the workplace when it comes to leadership. So what initially drew your attention to the impact of these generational divides on leadership and workplace culture?
You know, coming out of college, I didn't fully have a perspective that obviously didn't have the experience to give me any kind of perspective on the workforce. And so transitioning from the YMCA into construction, it was pretty eye-opening, primarily because I was forced into a position where I was working with people who had been in the industry for 40 years. And then I was, fresh into the industry. And then we had, some mid-level guys that had been 10, 15 years in the industry. And a lot of the problems that I encountered very early in my career at face value seemed like the general construction problems. Everybody said, oh, that's just how construction is. But my dad had always taught me, dive deeper into things and understand why. And so I probably frustrated a lot of my mentors early on because I tend to ask why. And really what I found at the root cause of a lot of our problems in the industry, they were actually due to just communication, because you've got a 1-year individual like myself, and you've got somebody who's been in the construction industry 40 years, and they're talking the same language, but it's a different dialect, right? So that really intrigued me. Obviously, with my background at the YMCA, I felt like, man, this is an opportunity for me to provide some value in the industry from a different perspective, and that's how do we get the 40-year veteran to communicate with the 1-year. In my industry, it's called project engineer, is your basic entry-level position. And so that really kind of sparked my interest, because it allowed me to problem solve on the construction side, but it gave me some more fire into the people development side of things, of figuring out how do you make people work and how do they communicate.
What are some of the most common generational differences you've observed in leadership approaches and workplace expectations? So you talked a little bit about communication, but is there anything else you want to add on to that?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously my perspective is primarily construction. I can't speak for every industry, but in the construction industry, as I mentioned, the communication aspect, but then from a leadership aspect as well, you have an old school mentality. You've got the guys who really came up through the hard, bootstrap, get your hands dirty culture, which quite frankly, I think has a lot of value still to this day in our industry. But you've got guys like that really came up through some hard times. And then you've got a new wave of construction management individuals who are more of the, I'm going to say, perhaps polished, fresh out of school, but haven't really had a chance to get their hands dirty. And I think some companies they recruit out of college and skip the hands dirty aspect. I'm a true advocate of we got to get our hands dirty. I run this, and on my first year interns, the first thing I teach them is, hey guys, gals, y'all are going to get out there. You're going to get dirty. You're going to work in the mud. You're going to, sling some concrete, because that's the basis of your career and the foundation that you're building. And so when you take those two different schools of upbringing, you're coming into a couple different factors when it comes to respect, right? A lot of the tenured individuals in the industry, sometimes they don't have quick respect for the younger generations. Again, it's that, bootstrap, get your hands dirty mentality. And so that's one front. And then obviously, like I mentioned earlier, the communication. And so you take those two factors, and it's really intriguing to really understand people and meet them where they're at, and figuring out, again, how do you get these people to communicate? There's such a vast difference in experiences, but 1 year in or 40 years, you both have perspectives and you both have value to add.
How has your Master of Engineering Technical Management helped you face this challenge?
What really drew me to the program originally was the fact that there was an emphasis on EQ, emotional intelligence. And obviously, as I've talked a lot about right in the last few minutes, is I enjoy people and I enjoy development, and I want to learn how to make people work better together. And so naturally, I was drawn to the EQ, emotional intelligence aspect. And so, when I talk to my interns, my entry-level engineers, I often give them examples of hard skills versus soft skills. And so the Master of Engineering program, it touched on the hard skills, which was how do you do your risk analysis? How do you, run your risk trees and all that? But then it also touched on the soft skills, which was understanding yourself as an individual. And I really enjoyed the EQ aspect of learning about myself. I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of myself. And in reality, after going through the program, I realized, okay, well, there's some things that I hadn't tapped into with my own perspective on things, my own outlook. And so through the program, it gave me great opportunity to self-reflect. And specifically in the program, and I believe y'all are probably still doing it, but you have an executive coach essentially. And, really that was a great opportunity for someone else to provide another set of eyes into my mind and into what I've got going on at work. And that was such an extreme growth opportunity for me that in the moment, I didn't even really understand the impact it was going to have on me. But coming out of it, I have just such a much broader understanding of myself. And to become a true leader in whatever industry you're in, I think one of the first things you have to do is understand yourself. And once you understand yourself, you're able to meet other people where they are. But without that self-awareness, without that understanding, it's hard to meet others where they're at and help them grow from there.
How can organizations create space for both experienced leaders and younger employees to influence culture in meaningful ways?
Driving collaboration comes, in my opinion, comes from a top-down perspective. And so a lot of times, middle manager leaders, executive leaders, they've got to drive a culture that enables individuals for cross contamination, collaboration, whatever you want to call it. When you get down to it, I've been a part of cultures where you don't necessarily have that collaborative environment, and it creates this natural divide where your 40-year guys, they aren't talking to your 1 year, your 2 year individuals. And there's a place for that culture. I think it's more of an old school mentality. But as we progress in the industry and as a society, as a whole, whatever workforce you're in, we're really going to have these leaders that understand how do you drive that collaboration. I think to the AI revolution, I read a lot about AI now to really understand how that's going to impact me, how it's going to impact my employees, and what's the next 5 to 10 years going to look like. And that's ultimately going to come down to self-aware leaders that understand their people. They understand how to drive that collaboration. They understand how to bring people together. And, I think sometimes I get labeled as a talker. Those people that know me will probably chuckle and say, definitely. I've had bosses, he'll probably listen to this, but Ross was one of my longtime mentors. And I think one time he said, man, he goes, you got to cut down your talking. And I think at that moment in time, it was accurate feedback, but I also understood that through talking, through communicating, we have organic realizations of things that we may not even realize we needed to understand.
Yeah.
And so as a leader, it's hard to kind of package together what that looks like. But, communication across all levels, across all disciplines is a big driver, especially with AI coming into play. Without the soft skills, what are we going to have? Because I think AI is going to take a lot of those hard skill things away from us. And so focus on the people, focus on the communication, and that's going to help things thrive.
While you're talking, it got me thinking, taking a step back from like, what should leaders do? How do you think that younger people who are employees in an organization should react to older generations of leadership and vice versa? How should older generations in a workplace react to younger generations? And like, what's the best way we can be reacting to each other to make the workplace like a healthy workplace?
I probably went off a little bit on the last answer. So we'll drill down a little more on this. As a fresh individual into whatever industry you're going into, I think sometimes you get students that coming out of school and they've got all this energy and they're ready to hit the ground running, and they've now reached a milestone. They've either graduated high school, graduated college, and with that, naturally, there's probably a little bit of arrogance, right? You've kind of reached the peak of your life so far. But I think sometimes that arrogance is looked upon as kind of a negative aspect, especially for people who have been in the industry. Because, I say this often, you don't know what you don't know. And no matter where you're at in life, I'm 12 years into my career. I still don't know what I don't know yet. But I can definitely say first year after school, graduating, entering the workforce, I definitely didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think for the young individuals who, strive to be those leaders and really want to provide value to wherever they're at in their life, you've kind of got to check that ego and understand that there's a lot to learn. And then you've got to provide grace to those leaders above you, to those mentors above you, because they're learning just as much as you are. Again, we're all at different points in our life. And then, completely flipping it, let's go to a 40-year veteran who's staring at retirement. I just had a phone call with a guy this morning. He said, man, I've got 37 days till I retire. And I go, oh, fantastic. Well, can you stick with it until we finish this project? And he goes, I think we can. But on the flip side, those are the guys that have a ton of knowledge. And I keep saying guys, obviously I'm in construction, the gals as well. Everybody brings so much value to the table when you've been in the industry for, 30, 40 years. But similar to the younger individuals entering the workforce, those aging out of the workforce, there's also a level of arrogance, right? And so we kind of got to check ourselves on the front end and the back end. I think those that are staring at retirement, leaving the industry, construction especially, can't speak to other industries, but construction especially, there's so much knowledge that isn't being passed down. And whether that's ego, that's just a burnout, arrogance, whatever you want to package that as, those leaders really have to take a step back and say, okay, I've got to provide some value at a deeper level than just clock in, clock out. Here's my, A, B, C tasks. Learn the people, understand the people, provide some value. And, I hope that, at least half the people that are aging out this year in the industry can provide a little bit of impact to those that are aging into the industry. And and providing that value to helping us grow.
So as younger generations move into leadership roles, what shifts in management culture do you anticipate or hope to see?
I'm already seeing some of it with the younger generation. I had an intern over the summer who did a fantastic job at really understanding how to put a team together and how to collaborate with that team. But I encourage those future leaders as they continue to grow. I really encourage them to drill down on those soft skills, on that emotional intelligence. And, I'll use an example. I'm working on an intern program for the interns that I've got started in January. And on my notepad, one of the things I've noticed is critical thinking. And school does a great job of teaching the hard skills, right? Most of our students coming out of undergraduate, they understand the hard skills. They understand 1 + 1 = 2. But there's a huge miss in understanding that, okay, in the real world, 1 + 1 may not always equal 2. There's different ways to get to the answer and those perspectives. And so to the younger leaders who are growing, understand that we need to provide value to those that we're developing and teaching from a critical thinking perspective, not just a hard skill perspective. And I think, again, tying into this AI, if we're able to teach people to be critical thinkers in, whichever aspect of industry they're in, it's gonna drive a deeper value and, hopefully provide some longevity, especially in the construction industry, where in 10 years, we might not need somebody to just do a hard calculation. We're going to have AI that's going to naturally spit out drawings and documents for us, but we are going to need people that understand, hey, I've got this guy over here, I've got this gal over here. They're not communicating. How do I get them to find common ground, and how do I get them to communicate so that we can provide an end product to, the client safely, profitably, and move the buck along?
What advice would you give to leaders who want to drive a strong, unified culture while respecting different generational perspectives and management styles?
Not to sound like a broken record, but you have to understand yourself. But additionally, humble inquisition. And I say that there was a period where I had a mentor who gave me a book to read, and it was a book on humble inquisition. And at that time, I didn't quite understand it. About 7 years later, I have a much better understanding. I understand why a lot of my mentors ask questions, and I hated that they would ask me questions. I would ask them a question, and I would get a question in return. And I just wanted the answer. And really, what that taught me was they were actually giving me an opportunity to critically think through and provide my own answer. And it was a very difficult learning period for me to learn that concept. Again, that's not necessarily a hard skill, that's a soft skill. And so I would encourage those leaders as they're progressing to understand the art of humble inquiry and know that, questioning things and understanding why, there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever industry you're in, it's always better to understand the why and ask those questions. And I think it's going to make you a better leader as you progress in your career.
Thank you for listening in to today's episode. Tech Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management. To learn more, visit metm.tamu.edu.